Please put in your questions, your comments about what you've been listening. I think Jarrett has given us some wonderful, wonderful ideas about what we could do out in the when we are outdoors. I was personally, I never thought about the wildlife first aid, so those are some of the wonderful things that he spoke about. And I'm watching some of the comments and the questions that have been coming up, and I think William, you put in some questions about how do you guide your 3 to 5-year-old to be gentle in nature. Yeah, they can be quite a handful, right? And excited while they're out in nature, and of course want to try and touch every slimy, slithering thing that can be there outside. And like you said, some kids can be violent towards insects or pull at plants. And you ask, to what degree should these behaviors be discouraged? And I think, Jarrett referred to something about risk and hazards. And I think you as a parent, of course, have to always, there's a teaching moment in right there, right? You're going to show your child, this is a dangerous insect or a plant. There are all kinds of things. We have poison ivy out there, and these are all teaching moments. I think maybe even if you have a pet at home, that's a nice way to kind of introduce to be gentle with an animal or with an insect. I know sometimes I've seen children squish spiders and put them in their mouth quickly, so yes, you have to watch out for those little things. And really, I think guidance comes in over here. Another question that came up was whether you should encourage your children if they're being, violent or being rough with some of the insects and plants, and whether any kind of behavior should be modeled. And I think, yes, definitely, I think, that's a great way to, this is, like I mentioned before, it's a great teaching moment. So modeling behaviors, telling them not to be careful. That's also a living animal, it can get hurt, it has feelings. I think these are beautiful teaching moments. And there are a couple of other things that I'd like to, I would like parents to remember. And I think Vicky also referred to that, and it's the power of trees. There are some wonderful TED Talks actually on that. And there's a professor from UBC who has spoken about the power that nature has on us. So bringing children early into these natural experiences, I think does a lot for their development. And I think Jarrett spoke about all the other things about how it helps their social and emotional development, cognitive skills, their motor skills when children are small. Their small motor skills are really developing. And when they, trip over or move over a little boulder or a log, I think you're helping their large motor skills also develop. So these are just wonderful ways for your children to learn about their experiences in the nature. So William had asked this question, and I hope that whatever I have said so far actually was correct, and you can probably add to that. So William's question was, it's a couple of questions. So how do you guide a 3 to 5-year-old to be gentle in nature? Some kids can be violent towards insects or pull at plants. To what degree should these behaviors be discouraged? And should kids be given space? Should be given space to see the consequences, or is it better to model another behavior?
These are great questions, William. I'm so thankful that you asked these questions. These are questions that we deal with in our program all the time, especially in the beginning of our program. We run our program September to June. We follow the school year. So when we welcome in new children who, some of them have never experienced playing in nature before, there is that there's that hump we have to get over, that empathy hump that we have to get over whenever children are playing in nature. They like to pick flowers, and they like to trample on plants, and they like to step on bugs. And that is part of their play. So there is a balance that we have to strike. We want them to connect with nature. We don't want to take them into a forest or onto a beach and say, look, but don't touch. Don't walk here, watch out for that. We want them to interact with nature and connect with it as much as they can. But we want them to connect with it respectfully and with empathy in mind. So how do we teach them? And that's your exact question. A lot of it depends on the child. Some children get it right away, and others, it takes some time. How I always address it is I try to make the experience, whatever the child is interacting with, whether they're like, hitting a living tree with a stick, or, stepping on a bug, or pulling leaves off a plant. I try to humanize the experience. I say, well, imagine that tree was a human. Imagine that tree was a person. And imagine that tree could speak. What do you think that tree would say to you if you were kept whacking it with a stick? And some children just, like, that's all they need. They just have this, they have this aha moment, and then they realize, okay, that's a living thing. And the tree can't speak, but maybe the tree has feelings, maybe it doesn't. Those are very abstract thoughts for children at that age, but at least they're making that connection, that human and life force connection. Other children, it takes some time. And, we very rarely tell children not to do something or stop, unless, of course, it's disrespectful, it's unsafe, and it's uncomfortable. That's a different story. But, if a child just wants to continually pick leaves off of a bush, we're going to allow that up until a certain point in hopes that they're understanding the process, and they're, we can see that they're getting there. Some children, it may take longer than others, but the ultimate goal is, of course, we want to respect the environment. We want to make sure that our environmental impact is as low as possible. So there is that empathy piece that we have to teach children. If it's, sometimes it's easier with insects, because I can talk about, well, the insect, do you think the insect has a family? Do you think the insect has friends? Do you think this insect, if this is a baby insect and they're out for a walk, do you think the mother or the father or both insects are waiting for that baby insect to return home? And what if we crush it and they don't return home? How would the family feel? And those are some really just wonderful real life situations that children, of course, we want to be age appropriate in our delivery, but children understand that and they get it. And and once they can relate to that life, to that tree, to that bush, to that butterfly, to that worm, once they can see that they're more equal in ways than not, they tend to respect those creatures in a much different way, and their play shifts.
I think you answered that so well, and I'm glad you're back, because I think you brought in aspects like empathy and so much, so much more about learning, that it's not just about physical learning or being outdoors. It's, there's a whole social emotional piece that you spoke about. So thank you for that, Jarrett. I'm very, very happy you're back.
My pleasure. I'm happy to be back, and I'm deeply sorry that we lost sound for a while.
This stuff happens. I think everybody knows what Zoom or Facebook is capable of, and technology is definitely not in our hands. And like you said, failure is important for us to keep learning.
That's right. Yes. I'm glad you got that at least. This is why I work in nature, not with computers.
I agree. I'm moving to the Comox Valley very soon.
Oh, well, we'll look forward to welcoming you.
So, Jarrett, we do have a couple of other questions, and
yes.
This is something that I was very curious about also. So, William spoke about children wanting to be in nature and wanting to touch everything and play with everything. But what about those little ones who don't want to touch, or don't like being out in nature, and don't like getting dirty, or don't like touching slimy stuff or getting wet? What advice would you have for those parents?
Oh, I love that question. It reminds me of a forest friend that we had in our Campbell River program. This is going back about 4 or 5 years ago. Before I answer the question, I just want to share this story. We had a child that came to us who was exactly like you're describing, Sangeeta, and exactly like William's question. He didn't want to get dirty. He didn't mind getting wet, but he didn't want to get dirty or muddy. And that's how he entered the program in September. And like the whole foundation of our program is getting wet and dirty and muddy. I mean, the dirtier and the muddier, the better. You see these huge grins on the children's face when they can just sort of let go and be totally comfortable in nature, and sit on a log like they're sitting on their couch. I mean, they just kind of nestle right in there. That's, of course, we love to see that. We love to see children who come with whatever level of comfort, but of course it's wonderful if they're really getting connected in that way. That's how this child arrived in September. By April of that same year, that child was doing the breaststroke in a puddle that was so deep. I mean, not too deep where, again, we're only allowing them in water about this deep, the height of their toe. But he was in that puddle just doing the breaststroke, and like the biggest grin. He was just as happy as could be. And I mean, that was just, so your question just reminds me of that particular child. In answer to that question is, it's the graduated process. It's the flow channel. We want to meet children where they're at. We don't want to push them. It's like going back to the team building activities. It's challenge by choice. What we need to do as parents, guardians, educators, teachers is merely, and of course, this all relates to your philosophy, but we just need to provide a safe and comfortable space for children to play in. So providing the space is what we should be doing, and then just allowing the child to interact with that natural environment at their own pace and at their own ability and at their own willingness. And if they're bored at the beginning and they don't know what to do and they don't want to get dirty, that's awesome. That's a great teachable moment. And we celebrate that boredom. Let that child be bored and don't introduce any structured play. And then the bald eagle is going to fly by and then they're going to get totally hooked on the bald eagle. And then that's a great opportunity to start singing songs about the bald eagle, telling stories about the bald eagle, Googling, art activities, nature-based art activities about the bald eagle. And then you get them hooked. And now they want to go back, and now we're going to go for a bald eagle hunt. But when we go back for a bald eagle hunt, we found the banana slug on the trail that this child is now super excited about. So we have to meet them where they're at, because if we push them too far, if we make them uncomfortable, of course they're going to resist. And that's going to put them in point 4 in that flow channel. That's going to create anxiety and stress and discomfort and just a general unwillingness to participate in playing in nature. So, there are some families that love to go hiking and camping and do all sorts of outdoor adventures and explorations, and that's great. But we can't expect our children to want those same things. We have to, and that goes back to what is needed to offer these safe and comfortable playing experience. We're the champions. We want to get out there, but you need the interest from the children. And so there's always a bit of compromise there, but at least in the beginning, just allow them to interact with nature the way they want to, and let them realize that getting wet is not going to put their fire out, and getting dirty is not going to be a forever stain on their skin. Let them see that. Let them realize that, nature, things will change in nature and their experience will change in nature. And hopefully they'll graduate to the point where they're doing breaststrokes in muddy puddles. But of course, we don't want to put that expectation on with them. If we want them to go as far, wide, and deep as they want to, and we just have to open up a safe and comfortable space for them to do so.
I think you brought up such an important point about meeting children where they're at, and I think gentle encouragement, I think, probably will work the best. You spoke about getting dirty and the benefits of getting dirty and, building immune system. So we actually have a question from Bobby Bruce, and he says, I read that soil in old growth forest has a bacteria that is easy to fight and actually boosts human immune system. If you dig an inch or so and smell a handful, is this true?
Apparently it is, and research does support. Yeah. We were born without gloves. And so I say that, kind of jokingly, but seriously, we were born to connect with the land. We were born to get our fingernails dirty and interact with the mud and interact with the moss. It's nice to have those layers of protection for rain and cold and all the rest, but there's no harm in getting dirt on our hands, and even to a certain point, research supports dirt in our mouths. Now, I'm not encouraging to go out and take spoonfuls of dirt, but there are healthy aspects to just the physical interaction with dirt, which is very different than inside dirt, like the dirt of the soils, the moss of the tree, like those, and unfortunately, I don't have supported documents or research right now to back it up, but there's extensive research on this subject. And in fact, what the research ultimately proves is that the more you interact with dirt, the healthier your body becomes, and it will produce less sick days in the long run. And we see that with our forest friends that we're playing with in the forest.
I think that is so important for us, all parents, and even us, to remember that, we are so interconnected with nature, and we kind of forget that, and somehow living in very clean, and I think the pandemic has just made it worse, washing our hands and having, alcohol and stuff to clean everything. And I'm just hoping that we can return to, the days where, you came in with dirty hands, and I'm not saying eat with dirty hands, but, develop that immune system, definitely.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
So we do have another question from Vicky Go, and her question is, are there programs out there for children to play in nature, like guided programs? And can you speak to different perspectives about nature for different cultures? I think that's such a lovely question.
Yeah, so there's, depending on the age group that we're talking about, there's tons of programs that are both child-led and that offer this experience with unstructured play, but then there's also structured play and led activities. Playing in nature, I began the presentation defining what it is, but really the definition is quite personal. Playing in nature can mean going on the forest walk, but it can also be playing soccer, right? Like you're outside, you're in the fresh air, the birds are flying around you, you're surrounded by trees. If the soccer field has trees surrounding it, you're outside, you're in nature. And so guided programs like baseball or soccer, or the sports, or running, or there's lots of those summer camps that are offering activities that have those guided events that are that the program is a part of. But again, talking about the different types of ages will determine what type of activity is being offered. I mean, there can be nature-based activities where its focus is on art, or its focus is on yoga, for example, and they're tying in nature to those guided programs. So yes, there's certainly tons of programs, both educator-led and child-led.
And we thank you for that, Jarrett. And Vicky had another part two to her question, and that was, can you speak to different perspectives about nature for different cultures?
Yeah, I'm wondering if Vicky can just expand a bit on what exactly she's asking there. I just want to make sure that I'm answering exactly what it is that she's referring to.
So it's Vicky from the library.
Oh, hi, Vicky.
Actually, hi everyone.
Hello.
And I think it's Dubravka earlier in the chat was also asking about this. She said that there's different perspectives about play from a European point of view than a North American point of view. And I wondered if you knew of like any other different perspectives from around the world about outdoor play and nature and so on.
Yeah, I mean, I could speak a bit about the European model and where the forest and nature movement began, and that's a philosophy that we follow in our programs. But I think ultimately, like every culture is going to have their own definition and belief and understanding and interpretation of what nature is to them and what play is to them and how they were raised to play. And so at the end of the road, there's no necessarily right and wrong answer. I think the key ingredient is that you get outside. I mean, nature play can be as simply as stepping outside your back door and playing in your yard. It doesn't have to be, getting to the top of a mountain or, like fully submersing yourself in nature. It's an individual experience for the adults that are offering for the children and for the children who are engaged in it. Nature is, just participating in nature is a very personal experience. And so that's where I feel like we just have to respect everyone's abilities and their own way of connecting to a natural environment and how they want to engage and play in it. And that may look different, depending on where you're from in the world. I don't think there's like a set rule how to do it. I think it's just a matter of, gearing yourself up for the outdoor elements and just getting out there and doing it. And that's then whatever becomes of it. I hope that answered your question, Vicky. All right.
So Jarrett, we have a couple of comments and one more question. And I think that will be our last question as we are running out of time.
Okay.
Dubravka says, it's unfortunate that it's called dirt when nothing in nature is actually dirty.
That's a great point. I love it. Yes.
Yeah. And there's another comment by Kat, and she says, over-sanitizing our homes is probably more damaging to our bodies than eating dirt from old-growth forests.
I thank you for saying that. There's lots of study and research that does support that. If you want to just kind of relate this to antibiotics, if you have a bacterial infection and you take antibiotics and you're killing all those healthy bugs in your gut, it's the same thing. Like, there are healthy bugs that live inside our bodies, and there's equally healthy bugs that need to live outside our bodies. And so I just, just as a disclaimer, I know, with COVID-19, we're in a different area of conversation in regards to sanitization and the rest. And I do agree for COVID-19, we need to do our best to make sure that we're protecting ourselves in that way. But if we're, in just talking about nature education and getting ourselves dirty, of course, it depends on the kind of on what you have on your hands. You certainly don't want to be playing in and around poisonous mushrooms and say, oh, well, that's okay, and then start eating your snack. Like, there has to be an understanding of the type of dirt that we're talking about. But generally speaking, going back to, I think it was Bobby who mentioned the old growth forest and the bacteria that it has, there's certainly supportive research that talks about just the healthy bacteria that's in there that's actually more beneficial for us than to not have it on our bodies.
So Jarrett, this is probably my last question now. You've spoken about, letting children be out in nature and also educating ourselves as parents. So are there any resources or books that you would recommend that we learn about how to do, wilderness first aid or wildlife awareness, or just, learning about different plants and which are poisonous, which are not poisonous? Any tips and resources for that?
Oh, yes, absolutely. Thank you for asking that. And maybe that's where you lost me in my presentation, because I talked about resources. Some of my go-to literature, this is in my library, and I go back to these books time and time again, and I highly encourage the participants out there to take a look at these books, starting with David Sobel's Place-Based Education. That's a fantastic read. David talks about connecting classrooms and communities to nature. Richard Louv, I'm sure you've heard of that name. If not, I would start with, it's a national bestseller, Last Child in the Woods, Saving Our Children from Nature Deficit Disorder. That is just a fantastic read. In fact, I would start your book collection with that one. Richard Louv also writes, he wrote The Nature Principle, Reconnecting with Life in a Virtual Age, another fantastic read. Liz McCaw wrote Outside Our Window. John Young wrote, now this is just kind of specific to a certain philosophy, The Coyote's Guide to Mentoring. John Young wrote Coyote's Guide to Connecting with Nature. That's again a fantastic book. And then there's lots of books out there that you can do research on your native habitat and learn what's, you know, the flora and what's poisonous and what's edible and what you should stay away from and what you can interact with. You know, and one of the wonders and the beauties of the age we live in is just doing a simple Google search. Wherever you are, you can, you know, you can Google search what are some healthy plants that you can eat or stay away from, and there'll be more information on the internet that you can find, and certainly lots of great books out there that support it.
Well, I think that's all we have time for today, Jarrett. It's been so wonderful listening to you, and you know, it's got me all excited about going outdoors again and enjoying being with nature. I just love the way you spoke about being in the flow, and I think that is something we don't even think about. So thank you for talking about that, and I think that is so important for for everyone, for everybody's mental health.
That's my pleasure, Sangeeta. And I think I was so in my flow in my presentation that I didn't even realize that you didn't hear what I was saying.
We can see how passionate you are about this, so it's all good, I think.
Sangeeta, if you don't mind, do we have time for me to end with a closing song?
Yeah.
All right, that's great. So I always open up our presentations and our days with our Hand in Hand song, and I close it with our Grateful song. So feel free to join me in the song. It goes like this. I am grateful for my friends. I am grateful for my friends. My friends make me feel great, and for that we celebrate. Thank you all once again for joining. It was really a pleasure presenting.
Oh, that was an absolutely fantastic note for us to end on. And so just as we wrap up, I just want to remind all our viewers that we will be here next Thursday for our last session. Next session is going to be a little bit interesting because we have a panel actually. It's going to be, you know, the lived experience of a parent, a lived experience of an educator, and how bringing up children is not just the role and responsibility of parents. It takes a village. And that's our topic for next week. So I look forward to all of you being here. Don't forget to visit your local library, check out all the great books and resources on our website, www.bflgrowscommunity.org. And I look forward to seeing all of you next week. And thank you to the Ministry of Children and Family Development for helping us make this happen. Thank you, everyone. Good evening. Bye-bye.